anthropologist, joining us, as we said, from her very warm base in Cape Town. Also founder and director of Human City. I've got a sort of quote from your website, Gemma, spatial strategy consultancy that specializes in helping people to take a successful and socially responsible approach to property development and asset management. Her current resume also lists about at least 5 other current demanding roles, as far as I can work out, all impressive on their own, including an honorary research fellow at UCL. So a very busy person, so thanks for giving us the time, Gemma. And I think, I've titled your piece Changing Needs and Desires, but you may want to retitle that immediately.
No, I think that's spot on. I think, yeah, it's a shifting landscape, as I'm sure the others will kind of join in, chime in and explain. So thanks so much for that generous introduction. Yeah, I would say, you know, a master of no trade, you know, what's the expression when you're kind of an expert in many things, but a master in nothing. So thanks so much for the introduction. I found myself in the built environment many years ago, so I'm enjoying working in this context, in this space, helping to inform decision-making, particularly with regard to social sustainability. So I'm going to present my slides just now. Just bear with me while I find my screen. Right. I might just share back to you, but let me know if can you see that slideshow?
Yep, great.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. You can see that, right? Good stuff. Okay, so as Jeremy pointed out, I'm a founder and director of Human City, and I can share more information about that later on. There's a website with lots of nice resources and content in there as well. But for now, we're going to talk about senior living and the opportunities in that context. So I've done some horizon scanning and some research of my own, which I'm going to be drawing on. I'm going to be exploring the market opportunities and potential disruptions to business as usual in light of these emerging trends. The drivers and needs, so the drivers of change and consumer needs in this context, and some solutions that are being brought forward and considerations, as I said, drawing on some of Human City's research around the sharing economy. But first of all, let's think about who we mean when we talk about over 55s. So it's actually quite a wide-ranging group of people. Undoubtedly, we're all talking about us, which is a little bit frightening. But you know, what is us? So the over 55s include baby boomers, with whom we're quite often more familiar. So there are two generations included in that, baby boomers 1 and 2, and also Gen X, who are coming of age, and those who are born between 1965 and 1980. And I guess all what we have in common is we're all pre-internet, right? Online is something we've become accustomed to. It's not necessarily an innate way of being. And I think that's probably the only thing that holds us together. But of these groups, boomers 1, so the over 70s, are by far the largest group in Europe, and they'll begin to shape decision-making in the near future. In particular, a number of women over 70 are growing, and there will be significant players with spending power. So in general, older people have high incomes compared to younger cohorts, and these groups of people are are waiting there to be tapped into in terms of there being a silver generation kind of economy emerging. In the UK, in EU, the share of households with a reference person over 60 years of age will increase from 36% in 2010 to more than 43% in 2030. Total household consumption in the share of 60 plus years of age households will increase in the following decades. So then that provides us with a reasoning as to why we need to really understand this generation and the economic opportunities that lie within it. Having said that, there's massive disparities within these groups. So even between the baby boomers 1 and 2, so those that are 1946 to 1954 and 1955 and 1964, there's disparity between those groups. So the baby boomers, who are often thought as wealthy and privileged generation of white men and women, are those that are baby boomers 1. But the baby boomers too are comparatively disenfranchised and perhaps less wealthy compared to their previous generation. So there is a diversity within these groups that's worth bearing in mind. So let's think about some of the emerging, we've talked about the opportunity, market opportunities, think about the emerging threats or the challenges that we're having to grapple with. So we're having to deal with, in the light of this growing and emerging group of people that's going to be quite important to decision-making in the future and is an economic source of opportunity, we've also got a healthcare system that's under-resourced and overstretched, and potentially unable to cope with so many people with multiple and chronic ailments. We've got a housing market that will see a glut of homes being sold by downsizing boomers, and potentially that could lead to a drop in home values. We have a workforce that's radically changing. So otherwise populated by boomers, these individuals are now retiring, particularly as a lot of COVID, apparently. A lot of individuals left the workforce early and taking their knowledge and expertise with them, leaving a gap. And returning to the housing issue, we've got a shortage of adequate housing for seniors and for those wanting to downsize and give up responsibilities of home and home maintenance. So we've got the threats. What do these individuals actually want? What are their needs? And I guess what can we offer them in terms of added value? So many are experiencing a change in lifestyle, relationship patterns are shifting, the children are leaving home, and some of them actually are emerging from relationships, long-term relationships, but newly single. In light of this, and across the spectrum of needs, they articulate a common interest in decreased cost of living, so paring down, reducing expenses, because of course, in retirement, they've got a fixed pot of money to live on. Thinking about maximizing their spare time. So many now are looking to enjoy the time they've got, not thinking about chores, not thinking about family responsibility, actually maximizing their spare time and leisure time, and also living simply. Many are looking to strip back obligations and responsibilities and just embrace a simple way of living. And some of their needs overlap with those of millennials. As we know, the millennial generation was influenced by the Great Recession of 2008. And this economic meltdown and actually the coronavirus as well had a profound influence on the millennial generation, who've been also trying to pare down and live more simply, prioritizing less income and a few material goods in exchange for a better quality of life. So there are many overlaps between that silver generation, baby boomer, and your millennials coming through, looking to pay off debts, but also decrease spending and invest more. Nonetheless, baby boomers face concrete challenges. So as well as nice to have gains, they're also having to grapple with the pains of maturity, let's put it that way. So what do we mean by pains? They're dealing with potentially declining health. That could look very different for multiple groups. As I said, the age spectrum for over 55 is quite wide. Nevertheless, declining health, they're combating loneliness. This is a critical issue because apparently 1 in 3 people over the age of 45 now declare themselves lonely. And they're also experiencing increased dependence on caregivers, also technological solutions, communities, and so therefore see themselves as becoming more dependent. So what does this mean in terms of what kind of solutions are they coming up with for themselves? What shifts or new decisions they're making in the context of their own lives? Many are downsizing. This was a survey done in 2016, so a little bit out of date, but I think it still remains true that the average size of homes purchased by seniors was smaller, and that's similar to millennials actually. So millennials and seniors are purchasing house sizes roughly with similar square feet, and the main reasons for seniors is they're seeking a smaller home, going back to that kind of simpler way of living, paring down, thinking about reduced overheads. At the same time, there's a survey done in 17 rather, that said that this generation, or the over 55s, are also looking to upsize, which is slightly surprising, but upsize to homes with 4 bedrooms. And that's because they're looking for increased capacity, maybe a couple of spare rooms for visitors to come, or a study and so forth. So actually, there was a survey that said that individuals are actually spending more money on their next purchase at the age of 55 and above, with a view to presumably also downsizing later on. So there's a bit of a kind of lift up in terms of capacity, and then paring down again. And in that context of upsizing, preferences for new builds. So again, this kind of emphasis on lack of maintenance, lack of hassle, better insulation, lower costs, and so forth. So for many baby boomers, an important goal is staying independent as long as possible. And so we're looking at the journey from independence to not dependence so much as interdependence. And this is where we're beginning to shift to what are the housing solutions that need to be brought forward. So many individuals would prefer to remain as independent as they can for as long as possible. So for them, that means dependence has to be look like independence. So I would term it as interdependence, not dependence. In general, there are many shared values with millennials, as I mentioned, and many are looking for housing solutions that offer interdependence in the form of socializing, looking from left to right, going from separation to socializing. There's a difference between offering assistance and being caregivers for others. So individuals, rather being in a caregiving situation, be rather in a situation of value exchange, where actually there's a mutual exchange and a relationship there that, as part of that, there is this care work being done, but it's not seen as a relationship of dependence. There's a shift from educating to learning. So these individuals are less in a position of top-down expert to actually learning and growing through their interactions with others. So apparently, as a person grows older, they transcend or move beyond previous understandings to gain new perspectives on fundamental existential issues. So actually, there's a need for growth. And also a shift from reflecting back to looking forward and reimagining new futures. So many are committed to a shared vision that's more than just about practical solutions, but actually looking at ideological aspirations and thinking about new ways of living, impact on the planet, and so forth. So actually, you know, there's a kind of a bit of a values-led approach there. So thinking about housing solutions, they're coming in many forms, and the guys in the call will talk much more to these in much more detail than I ever can. But you know, we're shifting from a village concept, which is very much a setup where you've got a community with a number of houses conveniently located around shared services. And actually, that's still quite a popular option for many individuals. To co-housing, these communities look quite different. They can look, co-housing can come in the form of individual housing units, while others condominiums, but many have common house with the kitchen area, spaces for meetings, socializing, guest rooms, and events and activities that are shared. To co-living. And in many respects, it's argued that co-living is more of a natural way of life, because it's only in the last 100 years we've lived individually in family units and separated ourselves from others. So actually shared living situations is, you know, arguably developmentally a more natural way of life. Taking this co-living or shared aspect a little further, just drawing on some research we did in the context of sharing and real estate, really unpacking what sharing could mean. It's not a one size fits all. Where various spaces and amenities are shared, there has to be an agreement as to what sharing actually means. So we studied the relationship between sharing and real estate, looking at what spaces were shared, by whom, why, and as part of this research came up with a spectrum of sharing. From allocated spaces on your left all the way through to blended spaces on your right. We're thinking about different elements: space, connectivity, personal impact, and messaging. And what does actually sharing look like across those different four aspects. The more conservative amongst us might still prefer allocated spaces with assigned, where we're assigned to work or live in a particular space, and connectivity between individuals is limited, residents are relatively isolated. On the other extreme, towards the blended end, we have what's much more of a neighborhood or hybrid a situation where tenants live, work and relax together. Those functions or activities overlap much more fluidly. There's discussion of a unified purpose and a sense of a home being communally owned. So there's a discussion around togetherness and our home as opposed to my space, for example. And the messaging would be, we're very committed, we're very passionate about this space and the shared offering that it brings to us and our community. So those two spectrums, I'm happy to work through that in a little bit more detail. But I'm going to move on now to a couple of the final slides, which is just thinking about emphasizing the idea of a hybrid space or a neighborhood where sharing is optimized across living, working and leisure. Hybrid spaces would include an element of all of these three activities, maximizing both community and convenience. But in offering an end user with a seamless experience, of course, you have to be very clear on how not only these spaces get designed, but how they're operated. Okay, so perhaps otherwise described as a sharing ecosystem, there's huge potential for shared spaces that combine living, working and play and bring together diverse audiences. And it is beginning to be an idea for accommodation for older people. Having said that, while it's a popular idea and co-living is being explored as a solution for senior living, in our research in the context of the sharing economy, the senior generation is actually less acclimatized to the sharing economy as a concept. So many choose not to engage with it actively, and it tends to be the activity of young, well-educated and high income Europeans, and they're the primary audience when it comes to the sharing economy. So there's a bit of a maybe, while it's a solution that's very much suited to senior generation and their needs, there might be a bit of an adjustment that needs to take place in them getting used to that concept of sharing. So in summary, a sharing situation could address an emerging problem and provide a solution to pains and provide obvious gains. Particularly around cost of living, cost effectiveness, and around belonging to a community and creating more of an interdependent living situation. But I guess I have questions still, which is how can it also provide residents with ongoing support in the context of declining health, or whether we separate those two things as and then that's an additional solution later down the line when that's required. How do we ensure that residents still are able to maximize their spare time? Quite often these situations are very hands-on. There's a requirement to get involved. And that's very much part of a shared living situation, but the individuals themselves might still want to have as much available time as they can just to do what they want to do. And how do we ensure that's increased simplicity while also maximizing convenience? So thanks, yeah, and just a few thoughts to go through.
That's fantastic, Gemma. Thank you very much. There's an awful lot in there to unpack. I mean, the relevance to the individual is noted, myself included.